We gotta let a little pause go by. So all the foo owls can exit the video. This one is not for foo owls. In this one, I'm gonna be talking to you all about the 5 types of black people. Why is this important? Well, this is important because if you are black, you probably, it's very likely in this day and age, you might not entirely know what that means. Why is this also important? This is also important because it gives you an oversight of the grand scheme of things. It gives you a basis to communicate across different archetypes, and it prevents you from being cycled into modernism and basically being you can, it prevents you from being, and also from being misled by culture, the culture, misled by the culture, that's what they call it. And by understanding the 5 types of black people, you can also understand where you stand on this. Now, before I get into this, I want to say, I spent a lifetime learning this, but also I think before getting into this, I also want to define what I mean by black people. What I mean by black people is, I mean black people in North America, black people that have the same heritage as Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Why is this important? Why is Malcolm X and Martin Luther King important? Well, when it comes to black people of America, you don't have a country. This is something that I've spoken on in the past. And for that reason, civil rights, like I've said in the past, is your country because it's the accumulation of all intellectual knowledge, cultural archetype, things that typically someone coming from a country would have derived from their country. So, for example, in China, they have, things that Chinese men take pride in as well as Chinese women. The same thing could be said for, any place in the world and people that come from those places. Black people, we come from North America, but specifically culturally, because you have to have your own unique culture. That is the culture that was derived from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Now, why is this also important? Because the culture that they derived from, the culture that they derived their culture and identity from, is derived from Black history, which is derived from the Bible. So it's derived from Southern Baptist, from the Southern Baptist Church. Okay, and then how does the Southern Baptist Church tie to you being black? Well, like I said, it ties to Malcolm and Martin, so that ties to the core archetype. of all foundational blacks, all tremendous blacks in time. But then that also ties you to the Bible. So the Holy Bible. So this is just to give you grand scheme of things. But even if you are black and you're not from North America, or you don't have, you could still have the same heritage, and you actually, I come to realize, are also in this archetype. Now, this is one thing that's really cool about this video, and it's coming into, fruition and whatnot. Is I actually made notes for this video years ago, and these notes right here are like my little jail notes. I got this right here is the toilet paper wrap, and then on the toilet paper wrap, I just got nothing but just notes. And this is just from being in the cell, and just all of this stuff really came, just came to fruition when I was in, like, a lot of things, come to fruition in jail and whatnot. But these are my notes from jail. So it's really cool. And I've had these notes for like 2 years. And I've just really been thinking to myself, at what point am I going to talk about this? And it's never really felt like the right time until now. And like I said, I spent a lifetime learning this. I've also done a bit of traveling and stuff like that. But yeah, these are all notes that were written in jail. But yeah, the 5 types of black people. Like I said, this will give you a one thing that's real, that one thing that was trending at one point that really had a lot of positivity behind it was woke. But this is something that will make you woke. So a lot of stuff I talk about here is truth. And what I a lot of stuff that I speak on, for that reason I title some of my videos with woke. Also with it knowing that, like, how much woke has been taken out of context. So I kind of also make videos and let people know, like, this is what really woke is. So anyways, last thing before I get this started, if the thumbnail of this video is if there's no thumbnail for this video, that means that I'm still in the editing process, which means I need to listen through it and just like edit it or whatever. So just know that, because this is live. And the last thing, this is last but not least, why is this live? This is live because if I don't make live videos, I will not upload at a reasonable pace. That's just what it is. If I sit around and I'm able to spend my sweet time editing, I'll sit there and I'll, edit the video down to the point where a lot of times I will talk myself out of it. All right. So things just have to be live in order for them to exist. This is what I've learned over all this time. All right. Now, the 5 types of black people. Wow, this is wild. There was once a time when I didn't even think I would ever be comfortable speaking on this, because I thought to myself, like, man, I can't really explain this. But trust me, I can explain it now. I can explain it now because recently some things have really come into fruition for me. And so with all of that preferencing of this video out of the way, I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. So you have 5 types of black people. All right. You have, and out of those 5 types of black people, you have 2 separating variables. Another thing I want to say before I get into this is not only will this give you a bigger picture of the grand scheme of things, this will, and not only will this give you a real basis to really understand what it means to be black, not only will this give you an understanding of where you stand on the spectrum, not only will this give you a blueprint to communicate across different archetypes with, but what this also will give you is an overview of slavery and how it impacts a culture over time when there is no history. Now, I know there are a lot of people that are just like, "Oh man, here we go with this," but like I said, the beginning of this video, I kind of try to keep it a little quiet because I wanted to give the Fuals some time to just kind of just get up out of here. And another thing too is, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I realize if I don't do this, nobody is going to do this. And it just is what it is. And also, why is this also especially important now? This is also especially really important now because it'll give you some understanding of like things that are happening around you, and basically the best position, the best way for you to manage it for whatever it's worth. You know, it's just a lot of people are blind, and this will give them some light so that they can see. So so yeah, there are basically five types. Really there are six types. Just get that out of the way, but for this video there's five types. And the five types are divided amongst two core trains of thought. The most up-to-date train of thought is the group of black people that do not accept slavery. And the train of thought that was the train of thought that you end up with when you remove Malcolm and Martin is basically the group of black people that identify as some slave to some capacity. Now, how do you know who is of which mind's frame? Typically, it's basically how they refer to themselves. So if somebody calls themselves a slave, then in that case, then typically they are slaves. Whereas the other group would never call themselves a slave or identify as such. The other group does call each other slaves, and they do identify as such. In fact, they identify them being black as their relativity to slavery, whereas uh, the other group of black people identify their idea of being black as um, it being relative to Martin and Malcolm. So why is this especially important? Now, this is a very interesting intersection in Black consciousness, but this is a true intersection in Black consciousness. And it's important that you understand it. Why is this very important? Because you need to understand that all great Black people come from the ladder of the thought processes. All right, the not Michael Jordan. It's wild because like some of these names, it's like you want to say them, but basically Muhammad Ali. Okay, um, Ray Robinson. Um, Malcolm X, all of the tremendous feats that would make someone say it now and say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Those people are all descendants of Martin and Malcolm, and they're all byproducts of that mindset. They're all byproducts of the Black Power mindset. All other groups that identified as slavery and identified as slaves, they are a part of the Black cooperation. Now, this division is to most Black people in this day and age is they can't see it. They're blind to it. And when you don't know it, you can fall victim to a lot of the sort of like pitfalls of the culture under the idea that is who you are. But yeah. Now, another thing about this, and also not knowing that this division exists, is a person can be on one side and not know that they're on that side entirely. Like a person could really identify as a slave and not actually come to the thinking that they identify as a slave because they're not aware of what it means to not be a slave. So they just, for and on top of that, they've never internalized anything that they've done as a form, or anything, or any way that they live as a form of slavery. One now so that's just basically really to preference it. Okay. Now, out of these five types, out of the types that identify in slavery or as slaves, those that refer to themselves that way, they're divided into three subgroups. So basically, when you look at slaves and slave history, and this is very important when it comes to Black consciousness, slave and slave history is something that's very important. But really, one thing that is not expressed enough that's really important is slave nature, slave behavior. Because why is this important? Because if you know slave nature and slave behavior as a Black person, then you can know what you should never portray, what you should not want to aspire for, unless you desire to have that be the result of your life. This is something that you don't understand when you're young. You don't understand how, like, if you do certain things, then you will be whatever it is that you do by default, if not by intention. You'll still be put in that same place because you align with that process. That's the flow of your stream. Now, like I said, a lot of people are born on this side of just being, you know, having this mentality of this is what I am, or this is the life that or that's how they are. This is literally the bottom. Now, one thing that you'll notice about this list is they're actually divided. The list changes with intelligence. That's just a little spoiler. It changes with intelligence. But here we are all the way at the bottom. And so this is going to be your These are going to be the black people that identify as slaves. How do they identify this way? They call each other slaves. And they're proud about it. All right. Now, now, out of slaves and slave history and slave behavior, there are two types of slaves. There's three types of slaves. You got field workers. These were the people that were out in the field doing the hard labor, picking, what it is they had to pick. When they didn't do what they were supposed to do, they'll be beaten. They go back out there, they do their work, and they'll work hard, and then they go back into the spot. All right. Then you had the house slave. These would be the ones that would oversee the field slaves, and they would basically they would also oversee issues with the house, so they would just have way better treatment. Typically these people would be like managers, they would be like, overseers, and they just make sure that everybody does what they do, and then they go back and they basically take on the stature of the the slave master. So they're still slaves, but they're just slave masters of slaves. All right, so that's your house and that's your field. Now there is another type of slave. All right, and that is the real slave. All right, now what is the real slave? The real slave was the one that was just like picking and just said, "This is lame. Like I'm like we don't need it." The real slave was the one that tried to run and got caught up. The real slave was the one that wasn't really going for being a slave. One example of a real slave was Nat Turner. I mean, you know what? That's not even a good example. And the reason I don't like using that example is because it's just too hostile. But it just, anyways, the point that I'm trying to make is just the one that that tried to buck the system. This is going to be the um the real slave. All right, and so these archetypes do still exist to this day. So for example, what is the type of person now? Wow, the percentiles, this is interesting. I have it all broken down into percentiles. Whew, these percentiles are tough, but now I'll get to the percentiles more towards the end. But what is an example of some modern house slaves and some modern field slaves? So Tommy Sotomayor, he is a prime example of a top tier house slave. Um, Another example of the house slaves, like, was if you watch like Django, um, um, Samuel L. Jackson was basically a house slave. Uncle Tom is a house slave. Um, who here's another Candle. Oh man, um, Candelina Rice. All right. Now, what are some example of some field slaves? So one example is Minister Jab. He's a guy out here on YouTube. You can check him out. Boondocks Riley. So Riley from the Boondocks. He's basically a field slave. Um, there's another guy on here named Angry Man. So I mean, whenever a lot of Tyler Perry characters, these are field slaves. Another example of a field slave were characters in Sanford and Son. So Sanford and Son characters, these are characteristics of field slaves, as well as characters in Good Times. These are field slaves. All right, they have the behavior, they have the architecture, and they also have that sort of country. or what's associated with time at that time southern intelligence. They also have that dialect. They have that strong dialect, that strong, like when you hear them talk, that dialect that's broken, but somehow it makes sense. All right, now, what are some examples of some real slaves? So, for example, Brother Polite, this is a real slave. Young Thug, this is a real slave. T.I., Offset, Wale, Judge Mills Lane, um, every judge that's loved in Baltimore, Rick Ross, Adrian Broner, Cat Williams, and Dave Chappelle. So these are like real slaves. Now, here's the thing, the difference between a field slave and a real slave is the real slave realizes through the system, the entire system, and they just come to a determination that they're not going to be a slave of it. So this is what makes them real slaves. These people will typically die to some capacity before they take on a full existence of a slave. They may accept certain aspects of it, but they'll never accept a full existence of it. And so, you know, this is what makes up the portion of Black people that identify their Blackness with slavery. Okay? Now, and believe it or not, that's how real the line is. Whenever you associate Blackness with some aspect of slavery, you identify your Blackness as slavery. You see Black as slavery. You see Black people as slaves. This is just what it is. It's baked into their psyche. And this is a matter of intelligence. Now, unfortunately, and this is also a matter of consciousness. See, one thing now, intelligence and consciousness are kind of touchy, because there are a lot of real slaves that are very intelligent, but also consciousness. These Black archetypes, which you'll realize, these Black types, they vary based on their level of consciousness. All right. Now, there's another group of Black people, and this is right above, this could almost even be equivalent to the slaves. It's not, because they're not as in tune with um they're not as in tune with the culture. See, that's what the culture a lot that's what a lot of right now, or a lot of time, like whenever Black is really identified as something to do with like slavery, that's kind of like the culture. But I'll be honest, like a lot of the culture, what that really is it's the system. The system of today is slavery of then. So those that were very much much in line with the system of slavery then are people that live in the system now. So whenever you see videos about a whole bunch of wild stuff going on, those are people that are in the system. So in a way, it's like you could interchange system with slaves. But the reason why it's important, because one, if you start saying stuff like real systems, it just takes everything just so out of context that it doesn't really make sense. But also, it takes things out of context in your association with what it means to be Black. This is very important because Malcolm X and Martin Luther King did not see black as slaves. They saw black from biblical perspectives. And this is even more evident in Malcolm X's existence because Malcolm X transitioned from seeing black because of his time in the system. Because of his time in the system. I'm so glad to see. I'm so glad to hear from Mike on this black issue because hold on, let me see what this says. They're fueled by greed and ambition of being just as good as white people. Instead of rebuilding the community, they aspire for prestige money. The only way those of us with low self-esteem feel normal. That's right. That's right. And see, what these people are is these are house slaves. Just as good as white people. Instead of rebuilding the community, they aspire for prestige money. What is this? This is slave nature. This is slave behavior. This is why it's important to understand this. When your favorite, when your favorite real, when your favorite real person gets money, do they do what somebody real would do? And I'll be honest. I mean, it's almost like that's like a reach, but when you take in the context where someone is from and what they know, why wouldn't they give back? So, anyways, um, so right above this archetype, those archetypes of black people. So those are black people that identify with black as slaves, as slavery. Then you get into the black people that don't identify with blacks as being tied to slavery. And the first group, and this is the lowest on the consciousness scale, is also the lowestness on the intelligence scale, are lost black people. So, who are lost black people? Lost black people are black people that are raised outside of the system, and because that's where most of the black community is. I'm just gonna just say it, call it for what it is. So for most black people that are raised outside of some aspect of the system, modern slavery, those black people will be lost, as well as black people that are raised in some form of first class. So some form of wealth. So maybe they could be like first generation in wealth. They will be detached from the black populace, which will also make them lost. And then the third group of lost black people are international black people. These are black people coming from other countries outside of America. um those that have no, and the reason why they will be lost is because they will not identify with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Why is it important that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, why are they so central to what it means to be black? Because they are the most advanced form. They are the accumulation of ultimate black advancement. In other words, their 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 philosophy is the philosophy that is most up to date by the most cutting edge, progressive, world accepted, world respected. The list can kind of go on, with you kind of like padding it. They're the most advanced status of black. They're so for that reason. This is why this is why their ideals determine whether or not someone is lost, or someone, whether or not someone is lost. This is will put someone in the lost black category. So a lot of times these people will be black, they look black, but they are lost. Why are they lost? Because they don't know anything about God. So because they don't know anything about God, they have no connection to their roots. What does this mean? This means that they cannot pick up where Malcolm and Martin left off. Why is this especially um, unfortunate? Well, this is unfortunate because they can never become tremendous. They can never become tremendous contributors to Black culture because they don't have what makes the what ultimately makes the best of us. Now, this may seem a little, you know, extra. And Mike, I'm gonna read your comments. This might seem a little extra, but once again, because Black people don't have a country, civil rights and all of that, and really like your immediate history is basically the blueprint that in order for you to be the best that you can be. If you were like born in like China or something like that, then you can know of yourself as being like a Chinaman, and you would have ideals. Your ideals and whatnot are all interwoven and interbaked in the civil rights movement, which was lived through Malcolm X and Martin Luther King foundationally. And all of this, and speaking of foundation, this is the foundation. Where does this come from? This comes from the Southern Baptist Church. Where does the Southern Baptist Church come from? It comes from the Bible, and that is the timeline of all your history. If you don't have this, like Pimp C said, we don't know our history. If you don't have this, then you don't know what the undeniably easiest path is for you to achieve greatness. So if you don't know what that is, then you don't have any guidance to archetype right from wrong. You don't have any guidance to determine what's the best case scenario for you as a Black person. You'll always be able to trivialize these things. All right. So when you are lost, this is what happens. And the thing about the lost Black people is they're more so like gentrified. Um, and also they're also a byproduct of a lot of Section 8 moves. This is one interesting detail. They're a byproduct of the Section 8 move. This is from my little jail notes that I'm reading over. They're byproducts of Section 8 moves. So what does this mean? This is another important detail of being Black. So Black people consist of tribes. All right. Black people consist of tribes. Black people consist of tribes here. Black people consist of tribes in Africa, in ancient form, whatever. Um, because you don't have a country, you don't really know who your tribes are. But here's the thing: as a Black person, for you to just by default get along with other Black people, like a lot of Black people don't understand like why they don't get along with other Black people and stuff like that. It's because you're from a different tribe. Okay, so Black people of the same tribe have things that have similarities that to them. They have hereditary similarities. They have hereditary interests as well as like hereditary disinterest as well as preferences. All of these things. These are all true to tribes. Another thing about this too is your tribe also kind of outlines your genetic background as well. So when you are lost, if you especially what happens with Section 8 was Section 8, it moved a lot of people all over the country with that with free housing. So if you have a lot of heritage, if your tribe, all these people that all move together, especially with things like the Great Migration. Let's say, for example, everyone in your genome or whatever moved to California, and then Section 8 moved you to Texas. Then what will happen is you will be lost because you will not you'll be like, man, I don't get along. I'm an outcast. I don't like any of these people. This is a common reality for a lot of black people. A lot of black people live in communities where they feel like they can't talk to nobody. They can't trust nobody. They don't know what's going on. Why is this? And I know how it feels. It's because they are around the wrong people. When you're around people that are of the same tribe, you understand a lot of things of what's going on, and you don't even have to talk. You don't have to know anything. You can go outside, you can look at the sky, you know what's going to happen in 10 minutes when you are around your tribe. When you are around your tribe, when you go to the stores, all the food that you looking for is right there at the front of the store. You like, man, as soon as you go in the store, how did they know that this is what I wanted? How did they know? Because everyone around that area in that place is like has the same interest. This is a byproduct of you being in your tribe. All right. So there are a lot of black people that are lost because they are separated from their tribe. Why else are they also lost? Because they have no connection to the black whole. They have no connection to the black populace. So they really oftentimes struggle with understanding what it means to be black. And as a byproduct of this, they have to rely on television and stuff like that. Now, another thing about these lost black people is lost black people um, typically are fatherless. This is another thing too about lost black people. This is in Section 8. So Section 8 created this whole fatherless situation. And why did they create this fatherless situation? Because you can't have Section 8 if you had a father in the household. So all of these black people constantly being moved all over the place, and then also not actually having a male as an anchor of the household is what created all of this isolation and which created all of this separation. Because like I said, there's no strong anchor to keep everyone safe, so there's no incentive for the household to expand any further. As far as like networks and whatnot, your mom can't go to some other dude's spot, that has that has a family of his own, and then create a bond that's not going to be threatened. That's going to not somewhat be a threat of whatever other family structure that was in place, if that makes any sense. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to read this comment real quick. Hold on. Hispanics turning their backs to the black man are paying the price. People are being profiled and deported, and they all say, but we're hardworking people. They had no realization of the evil they surrounded by because, like you said, they don't the history of civil rights in America, Section 8, welfare, etc. It's all a scheme to stagnate progress. Okay. Hispanics turning their backs to the black man. I don't know. I can't say that Hispanics turning their backs on black men are paying the price when the people that are paying the price are the Hispanics that are illegally in the country because they decided to go through the border. The Hispanics, for whoever they are that turn their backs on black men, I don't know. Can you tell me at what point you know they turn their backs on black men? I'm kind of interested in that because I personally have not been aware of any point. But these five archetypes will give you, um, like I said, an idea of the grand picture. So you'll really understand like what it means, what black is. Like I said, by understanding these archetypes, and it'll give you an idea. It'll give you more light so that you'll be able to see clearly through a lot of these things. Like, for example, the relationship between Hispanic men and black men, or if that's how you want to put it. So yeah, so you have lost, and in this one I'll use the term Negro. You have lost Negroes, and this is a byproduct of Section 8 moves. So Section 8 moves, you move to a whole nother state a lot of times, and then also not having a father as a way is basically a requirement for Section 8. By removing a father from a household, it just really does a lot of just like not a lot of good things. And there's so many statistics on it, but long story short, these are lost black people. Now, when they do succeed in life, these will be the black people that do things. Now here's the thing. It's not just Section 8. Like I said, you could also be first generation non-poverty. How about I think that's a better way to put it. If you're like first generation, like non-poverty, first generation, first class, better yet, or if you're like first generation integrated school system, then in this case, a lot of times they will be lost. And so these will be black people, and one clear sign of typical lost black people is they will typically have occupations that like no black person ever really has. Like, for example, they'll be police officers a lot of times. They'll be surfers. They'll be skateboarders. They'll have like occupations that most black people like don't really have access to or don't have any innate interest in. They'll play golf a lot of times. Um, and it's interesting because so it can really vary with them, but that's basically them. And the reason why it's important to know that they exist is because of how they interact with the other archetypes. And also, if you are lost, it's also kind of good to know that, because when you know that you're lost, then you're able to traverse the other archetypes. You can be found, and you can be raised up. You can have awareness and self consciousness. See, the problem with being lost is, see, on one hand, you could say, well, what difference does it make if you're lost if you don't know you're lost? And you could also say something to the thought of like, well, ignorance is bliss. And yes, but the thing about it is, when you're lost, you have no sense of self, and so you have no basis. So because you have no basis, you're subject to move and shift in ways that don't benefit you. Like, for example, you basically likely to mimic other groups, not necessarily knowing which way to go. A lot of times, lost black people look at TV to try to figure out what black people are doing, because they figure that they're black, and they're supposed to do that. And then what does that ends up happening? They end up letting town pound and all types of wild stuff like that. It doesn't do anything good for them. So you're actually, when you know that you're lost, you're able to traverse these things. And like I said, this is going to be, I'm going to kind of cover up some of these. But anyways, like I said, this is going to be on the consciousness arc. All right. And so when you know where you are in the consciousness arc, you can go, you want to go up in consciousness. You don't want to go down. All right. And so this is going to give you the other archetypes. All right. Now, for the rest, the black people that are continuations of Malcolm and Martin, these are going to be black people. All right. Now, black people consist of 3 subgroups as well. All right. And the title of this is the 5 types of black, but it's really 6. But the only reason why I label it 5 and not 6, just thinking out of the top of my head, is because one of the groups is so small, they only account for 5%, so they're not really an archetype. With that said, it's good to speak on them because they are what they are. But like I said, this group now, what you're getting is you're getting black people. Okay, this is black people, and these are black people that don't identify with slavery. Now, how do you know they don't identify with slavery? Because they don't call themselves slaves. And if you call them a slave, they will get offended. What is so, if they hear somebody refer to them as a slave, they will get offended. They're going to sit there and do something about it. Um, what is another thing that makes them black people? Well, they have they have modern they have they have middle class occupations. So what does this mean? This means they have jobs at banks. This means they have jobs in the school systems. This means they have jobs in government. Um, this means they also have things of the modern society. Like what are some things that black people have in my that this means they have things like bank accounts. A lot of black people that identify uh, in slavery do not have things like bank accounts, do not have these occupations. They don't have jobs. They're not police officers. You know, more than likely. Why is this? Because they are lower on the consciousness scale. Also, they are lower on the intelligence scale. If they do have these occupations, because see, here's the thing: when it comes to the house slaves and the field slaves, house slaves resemble their masters. So for that reason, they oftentimes in this day and age have occupations that their masters have. So they are going to also be lawyers. They are going to also, you know, be doctors. As much as I don't want to say it, it's interesting when you can think about it. Actually, no, could they be a doctor? I don't know. No, they couldn't be a doctor. And you know what? They couldn't be a lawyer, but they will be things like I said. They'll be police officers. Like they'll be positions where their intelligence could be questionable, because the thing is that they can't occupy a position that requires high intelligence, because if they had high intelligence, then they wouldn't be a house slave. They would be a black person. But so for that reason, what you will realize and what you will find when it comes to the house slaves is that they will occupy like jobs and stuff like that, but they won't really have a lot going upstairs. And another thing you will realize with them is um, their style, their nature, and their fashion. It will resemble that of a house slave. So they will have that house slave fashion. What is house slave fashion? Well, if there's a movie speaking of house slave called Get Out, and so what you will see is the black people and the way that they dress in in Get Out is the house slave fashion. So they are going to have a sort of Mason Dixon, Mason Dixon, Dixie. I don't even know what to call it, but basically that sort of southern, um, that sort of southern house um, lady look. That sort of fashion. That's sort of you know it just comes from the south. So um but with that said, so yeah, you have black people. These are but aside from that, aside from the house that managed to sort of be in this same area, you also have black people. So these are going to be also your HBCU academics. So what are some good example of black people? Well, Floyd Mayweather is a real good example of a black person. the NFL, a lot of NFL players are black people. Developed NBA players are especially black people. Like developed, like the NBA really makes black people. If there's a place that makes black people, it's the NBA. Kevin Samuels, he's a black person. But Skip Bayless, he's a black person. Booker T, you know that they're black people because typically they're founded in education. Their occupations are founded in education. Now, the one thing, and of now, and like I said, this is the other subgroup of black people. So, like I said in the beginning, you have two primary groups of black people. You have black people that identify with slavery, and you have black people that that identify with the progress of Mountain and Martin Luther King. So you have black people that are built from that. I also and so these are the black people that are built from that. This is why HBC. This is where you see the HBCU. This is where you see the academics. This is where you see. This is why things like the NBA and the NFL manage to be so closely tied to this. Um, some black police. A lot of black people will also be police. Now another thing that I want to get across about black people. Devin Haney is a black person. Kevin Hart is a black person. All right. So these are black people. Now, black people, like I said, they consist of three subgroups. All right. You have 5%ers. All right. So this is going to be 5% of them. Then you have black people. All right. So this is going to be your byproduct of, these are going to be like, your base black people. Then you have black modern. And it's interesting because, see, black moderns and black people are oftentimes like one and the same. So how do I explain this? So just like someone that's lost can likely be like first class non-poverty, that is the case a lot of times with lost black people, but for the most part, that really speaks to a majority of actual black people. So black people are black people that have transcended slavery, and typically their backline, their history, like their immediate family has accomplished something in the world through some form of academics, through some form of education, or through some form of career. So they may have had a career at a bank, they may have had some sort of business, they've done things, but they're able to do things legally. So legal, like living legally is something too that really separates the two. If you're born on the other side, if you're born in the system, then you're born under, you know, you're born in the system. So like I said, you're not necessarily dealing with bank accounts. All right. You're more likely dealing with cash a lot more than often. This is more, you're more on that side of things. Black people, on the other hand, they're on the other side of, they're like on like the sort of like more padded side of black reality. Um Now you have, like I said, you have black moderns, and then you have black people. And the thing about black moderns and black people is, once you get on this side of black reality, this is a dividing variable of black people. So once you are on this side, then the other side is harder to communicate with. Once you're on the other side, then this side is hard to communicate with. What I mean is, once you go through the system, once you go through penitentiaries, once you go through, you know, social services, once you go through halfway houses, once you go through orphanages, then you'll sitting over here trying to communicate with these people over here that got, like, a job, and they've been living life on the straight and narrow and all that. You sitting over there trying to communicate with them, going back and forth, it doesn't work that way. It never works that way. There will always be some sort of division. And what do I mean by that? I'll just tell you something cliche. They'll say something like, "Oh, you could take someone out of the hood, but you can't take the hood out of them." You heard that before, right? All right. So that basically is that line. All right. Now, black people, unfortunately, in this day and age, are in the minority. Now, there's two types of black people, predominantly. All right. Then you have black people, like I said, you have, like, your Skip Bayless and your Floyd Mayweathers and your Booker T's and your Boys Watkins. Those are going to be, like I said, the academic types or whatever, or the types that manage to achieve something, of the, or whatever. So they sort of live in this sort of class. Another, like, for example, like Devin Haney. All right. Then you have black moderns. Black moderns are the same. The only difference is the black moderns are what the world wants black people to be. So whenever you sort of get into society, you have black pressures. Okay. Now, and depending on how society feels about black people, it's going to have an ideal version of the black person that fits into the mold of with everybody else. So the black modern is basically what the world wants black people to be. So a lot of black people are black modern. Why are they black modern? Because they coexist amongst the mainstream, and they coexist in multicultural environments more often. So for this reason, they conform to modernism. And so they typically take on the behaviors of what people want them to be. So at one point, it was like being very astute and very punctual. That's how it was back in the 90s. In the early 2000s, it was like being like whatever they were doing in rap. I don't even remember what it was, but I guess it was like, pimping hoes and cat and slamming Cadillac doors. I mean, that's really what it was like in the early 2000s. And then so right now, what it is basically, being a foo and letting it all out. That's what it is now. And then, so basically, this is what you're seeing in this sort of space. What do I mean by this space? Who are the black people working in the colleges? Who are the black people working in the law offices? Who are the black people working in government? These are the black people that fit this mold. This is also a lot of, like, the lost black people will also be inclined to be this way. All right, these are black modern people. These are the people. Now, where else are black modern people reflected? Black modern people are reflected on television. The black person that you see on TV is the black modern archetype. He's the person that is being transmitted by the mainstream to the black people as being the ideal black person. All right, and these people are black modern. One thing about the black modern is the black modern doesn't have any connection to God. And one thing about the black modern in real life is the black modern truly doesn't have any connection to the culture either. The black modern really is kind of like the lost black person. And so this is weird. This is interesting because when you realize that black moderns are in this place, this is kind of like Floyd Mayweather in a lot of ways. Now, one thing that's interesting about Floyd Mayweather, see, Floyd Mayweather is an interesting um, person in this when you look at these five types, because Floyd Mayweather has been managed to traverse through consciousness and perspective the sort of the black five types. At one point, he could have been considered to have been, a real slave when he was boxing. And then at some point, even to this day, you could consider him to be a real slave, especially when you take into consideration what my guy Mike was talking about, how they aspire for money and all this wealth, and how they want to be like this, how they want to be like these people. This is the exact same thing that this man is doing right now. This man over here giving money to Israel and all this types of wild stuff like this. And then every time something comes up, he always want to sit there and, you know what I'm saying, take an offense to where it's like, he did what he did, in terms of winning them fights, but he ain't got nothing for another black person. This is the perspective that he takes. This is the perspective of a black modern. This is a black person archetype. These are black moderns, and another thing that really defines a black modern is, see, a black modern doesn't see themselves as a black person. They understand that their skin is brown. They understand, all this other stuff. They don't see themselves as a black person. What they see themselves is they see themselves as their career. All right. Now, similar to this will be like, they say I'm not a black person, or whatever. I'm a black. So they'll have the opinion, whether they identify with it or not. Their intellectual basis, because they don't identify with the black spectrum, the black intellect, they identify with the next best thing, and in that case, it's whatever occupation they are. So they'll have the mentality of a black lawyer. They'll have the mentality of the typical black doctor. They'll have the mentality of a black dentist. It's not rocket science when you understand it. Truly, it doesn't come as a surprise when they end up being, a person that's a black person, Kamala Harris. That is a black person. Even though, they did the genealogy or whatever, and they knew that she wasn't black. I'm just talking about in terms of that character of individual. That's it. Those values, all of that stuff. That's black modern. That's what the world wants you to be as a black person. All right. So, and then you have the 5%, and I'm going to get into the 5%, because that's my favorite point, and we're going to be breaking these things down. But before we get any deeper into this, I want to check out my guy Mike's comments, because it seemed like he said something. So hold on. If you make it and get rich, they will pretend like they always knew you'd make it. That's what they'll tell everyone, knowing they thought you never make it. They're all about gaining power through employment. If you make it and get rich, black people, they're all about empowerment through employment. That's right. Black people, they all about empowerment through employment. That's the best way to sum them up. And it's interesting, because just like when it comes to slaves, you had house slaves, you had field slaves, and you have real slaves. When it comes to black people, you have lost black people, you have black people, which for the most part are black moderns, and then you have 5%ers. You have the top 5%. And these are going to consist of, and what is the top 5%? Well, the top 5% is the top 5% of intellect, as well as the top 5% of consciousness. It's not just a status of superiority. It is a byproduct of where you stand consciously and where you stand where you stand intellectually. And the only way that you can reach the 5%, the top 5%, is if you know what it means to be black. If you don't know what it means to be black, you'll get stuck at being lost. All right, you'll be stuck at being lost, and I don't mind. It's all right. I'm cool. I don't have anything too crazy on these notes. These are my little jail notes. But you'll be stuck right here in the middle of consciousness, and you'll be at the swing of whatever the world has going. You would have probably been up there. Like I said, you know what the mission statement is right now? Is get down and give me 10. And if you don't know your history, you probably be getting down, giving them 10. But see, what you have to understand is you'll never be able to reach the top 5% of consciousness, and you'll never be able to reach the top 5% of intellect. You might be able to reach one or whatever, but you're never going to be able to have both at the same time. So you'll always be right there in the middle, consciously, intellectually. They always seem to teeter around the same place. Now, who are some examples of 5%? 5%. Top 5%. Black people. So one example is going to be Claude Anderson. All right. Another example is going to be Barack Obama. Another example is going to be more or less your Colin Kaepernick, even though he's mixed. It's just his character is going to give you the character of Wudge. Nipsey Hussle, Malcolm X, Huey P. Newton, as well as Huey P. from the Boondocks. These people exhibit characteristics of 5%. Who else are the 5%ers? 5%ers are freedom fighters. 5%ers, when it comes to being referred to as a slave, they will see that as the ultimate offense. And what is a way of summarizing the 5%? Well, the 5% are the intelligence and the super intelligence of the culture, the super intelligence of the soul of the culture, the super intelligence of Black people. These people are descendants of Martin Luther King. These are descendants of Malcolm X. When they talk about the Motown era, when they talk about Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, who else? Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Roy Jones, the 90s. All of this are byproducts of 5% Black intelligence. So those are basically the 5 types of Black people. You have 5%ers, which basically are 5%. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over these types one more time, just summarize, and I'm going to give you guys some more in-depth detail of them. So just some of the points I might have missed, because like when I was in jail, I really wrote like stuff down. I got a whole bunch, like seriously, I got so many notes. Like, look at this. I got so many notes. Like, this is all stuff that I literally sat there and wrote when I was in jail. And it's cool too, because I didn't just talk about, Black people. I got Jezebels too. All right. So we got all types of stuff to talk about. But I've been kind of just waiting for this stuff to more or less dawn on me for the right moment to really strike with this stuff, because I've thought of like types of different approaches. But anyways, let me just go over these types. So you have 5%ers, all right? This is really going to be 5%. Then you have black people. This is now I'm just going to get this out of the way. This is 10%. 10% of the black population are black people. All right. Out of black people, you have uh, basically, for the most part, three subgroups. You have black people. These are going to be just traditionally black people of higher society. Um, these are going to be the people that get power through employment, like my guy Mike said. That was great. These are black people. Then you have black modern people. These are black people that managed to get into this status of society by being exactly what the world wants them to be. So that's who they are. Then you have lost black people, and these are black people that are totally out of the diaspora. They have no connection. They have no place or paddle in order to get back. These are black people also that assume that what black is what they see on TV. All right. In fact, then this actually, um, yeah, I guess that's a part of the 10%. Then you have real slaves. All right, so now we're going down in consciousness, and we're going on the not now we're going into the lower levels of consciousness. We're going in the lower half. All right, these are black people that identify with blackness as being something relative to slavery. All right. Um, this is going to be, pig feet, pig nose. All right. So now you have real slaves. This is going to be about 15% of the black population are real slaves. All right. Then you have slaves, black people identify as slaves. This is going to be about 60%. All right. So 60% of your black populace is going to identify with their blackness as being something relative to slavery. This is where you get, like I said, your Tyler Perry characters. This is where you get your cookouts. This is where you get, your Minister Jabs. This is also interesting enough. This is also where you get your Candelina Rices. This is also where you get your Tommy Sotomayor. See, it's not necessarily. This is also where you get your divestors. See, they have their own sort of way of living. It's just that way of living is antiquated, and it's antiquated due to the accomplishments of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and even those that directly followed them, such as Bill Cosby and also Dr. Claude Anderson. When you actually, if you're fortunate enough to be able to follow Black consciousness, act effectively and not get caught up with a lot of these scammers and frauds like Brother Polite, some of the scammers like what's the name of this other guy? Um, uh, there was Brother Polite, and then there's also this other dude supposedly building some sort of school. You get caught up with these people. They're not telling you nothing but a whole bunch of ooh yeah and stuff, making you feel powerful and strong. But if you go from, if you go from Martin Luther King to Malcolm X to Bill Cosby to Claude Anderson, what you really get is you get an understanding of economics, you get an understanding of capitalism, and you also get an understanding of your spiritual history. And all of these things together are what put you at that top 5%. Now, like I said, you could be born in the system and never really be able to escape it mentally. A lot of what is framed in your mind is really developed in the early stages of your life. So, learning things as an adult is very hard. This is why a lot of times the 60 to 15%, that's 75% people, black people exist, North American black people exist in some form of slavery, some form of the system, some form of welfare. 60%, 75%, no, 75%, about 75%. Lost Negroes, 10%. Jim Crow era, 60%. Real Negroes, 15%. Black people, 10%. 5%ers, 5%. I sat here in jail and mapped this out. This is not something I put together overnight. Now, interest now. You could almost break it down into religious perspectives. You're 5% black people, your super intelligence, you know, your black super intelligence is pretty much going to be pretty much your prophets. All right, they're going to be pretty much your prophets. These are also going to be your actual pro-blacks. All right, so these are going to be people like me. These are people like B Dot. These are going to be your freedom fighters. These are all the people of the civil rights movement, and these are all the people that black people, the strongest black people, architected themselves against. They did not archetype themselves against Tyler Perry characters. They archetyped themselves against 5%ers, the top 5%. See, that's the difference between not having a country and having a country. See, when you have a country, you have history. And when you have history, you have that clear 5% to always guide you in your direction and what defines you as a culture and what defines you as a people. When you don't have that, then there's no clear cut reasoning. There's no clear cut archetype. There's no clear cut structure. There's no clear cut superior, identity. And what you will find is that, like I said, all of the strongest black people of the world, the most advanced black people, are the most advanced. And what is the most advanced? The most advanced is understanding Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Claude Anderson, and Bill Cosby. The thing that they spoke on, Bill Cosby spoke on the family home, the household family. Claude Anderson spoke on economics. Malcolm X spoke on black capitalism and what can be considered to be black nationalism, but we know what that means. It's really black capitalism. All right. And what did Martin Luther King speak on? Martin Luther King spoke on equality and human rights. This is the civil rights movement. This is what has been convoluted. Right. And this gives you an idea of the impact of slavery. This is how slavery has affected black people. See, one thing about black people, and the one thing that you will notice on this little YouTube space is a lot of the black videos that get a lot of views, it'll just be, black people running around, talking crazy about other black people and what's going on, and they'll just be sitting there in the thumbnail with their hands, all in their face, like, oh, we just can't get it right and all this other stuff. But see, the thing is, when you don't know anything about your background and you don't know, especially the system, a lot of these people will be lost black people, or there'll be some type of just typical black person that's out of touch with the grander 75%. They'll watch TV and assume that's what it's about. They don't know that this is a byproduct of slavery. This is a byproduct of the black image being portrayed of a slave. See, the thing is, you'll be saying, oh, well, what do you mean the black image is being portrayed as a slave? Well, what I mean is, like I said in the beginning, there is a division between black people, between those of us that identify as slavery, or those of us that are born in slavery and just don't really know what's going on. We just think that that's what black is, and those of us that don't see that as what black is. And the majority, unfortunately, at the rate of about 75%, think that that's what it is. And out of that 75%, then you have another 25% of black people. These are black people who have their head above water, that are in modern society. But out of them, only only a good 10% actually know what it means to be black and are progressive and are able to operate in that top percentile of what it means for them to be black. Now, just saying the word percentile, it really, what it brings up to me is it really brings up my background in accounting and the time spent at, learning about accounting firms and how, some of the top firms in the world and how they're always trying to make sure you test within the top percentiles of the foolishness. Yeah, a person can gauge that whatever percentile they're at with income, but like my guy Mike said, you over here trying to achieve empowerment through employment. That ain't no percentile. Being in your top percentile really means that you will really have a highly conscious perspective, and you will also have a highly intelligent perspective. uh, now, what this will do is it'll put you in the top percentile, and that'll put you in. Wow, I'm kind of like restating the same information, but it'll keep you in that top 25%. Even if you are a lawyer, even if you are a doctor, even if you are, you do something somewhat academic, if you know what it means to be black, you won't, uh, you won't yourself. All right, you won't compromise yourself, or do something that to where it's like, it's like that, you'll basically have guidance as to like, what it is, what it means to be black and what you should do as a black person. But only will you have this innate guidance when you accept God. And this is why God is so central to being black. I remember there was this one thing, and I'm gonna get into these five archetypes a little bit more before this lets out. But one example of this is there's this video on YouTube, and it has like millions of views, and it talks about like, can you detect the black person or the white person in the room? And it was one of those like, trendy YouTube videos where they all wear blindfolds and they go through a bunch of questions. So long story short, the dudes in this video, a lot of them are, real, modern, and they don't have any, none of them sound like they're black. None of them sound black. None of them act black. And even when they talk, they don't even, you know what I mean? Like they admit that they are out of touch. And when you look at the way they dress, the way that they dress is very whack, is very lame, is very weak. Why is this? Because they don't know what it means to be black, so they don't even know where to start. The only thing that they can do is sit there and judge their environment. And what do? They look at other people from other cultures and they try to adapt it into who they are. And when they apply it to themselves, it looks dumb. It looks bad. Why? Because it's not for them. Because it's not something that, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King deemed, to some degree. You understand what I'm saying from that train of thought. They over here trying to be an Irishman and they don't have orange hair. They don't have red hair. They want to wear green shirts, like an Irishman. I mean, don't get me wrong, green or black, whatever. That's not. You understand what I'm saying, though. You know what I mean? Like they want to have four clovers. No, you understand? They want to, they want to, be Shaolin monks. No, I mean you could do it, but doing it from a place of consciousness versus doing it from a place of ideals are not one and the same. So yeah, when you look at these videos, these people will be in these videos and they'll be talking and they'll be sounding wild and they won't have any real assessment of what it means to be black. And see, this is very dangerous because what will happen is in an effort for these type of people to unify and for these type of people to relate, they will take on black stereotypes that they learn through watching television, and they will think that that's what it means to be black. And this is the reason why a lot of times a lot of times people from the black space, one, can't actually, reach out or whatever, or make a strong relationship because their whole character is artificial. This is and they got to sit there, and I mean, it is what it is. When you don't really know what being black is, I mean, it's an attempt. A lot of times it can be an attempt to try to speak across archetypes. um I'm going to make sure I also, this is also very bad because this is the type of mentality that will have it to where a black person or a black, or there could be like a black family or something, and they could have, a lot of a lot of uh, a lot of things to that they a lot of things in their life they should be grateful for. But a lot of times these people will seek to live the low life with the mentality that them living like that makes them more of a black person, or it puts them more in tune with the culture, or it makes them more real or whatever. Like they let town they let the town pound because that's in their mind. That's what connects them to Sexy Red, and that's how they could keep their what I'm saying, true identity and all this other stuff. This type of stuff happens when you don't know what it means to be black. See, this is the reason why both can exist, and one doesn't have to sit and why can't we just get it right? You see what I'm saying? You got to understand where you are at on this spectrum. You sit there and you are lost. You are sitting here going backwards, just because this is what you were told you are. These people are straight telling you, like, look, you are supposed to be black, so this I got some chicken for you. You with a hot sauce. So it is what it is. If that's what you enjoy, but like I said, this is the divisioning. This is the division, and it's unspoken because a lot of it is unknown. A lot of people do not have the intelligence to decipher this sort of situation, to decipher what it means to be black. Most people do not know what it means to be black. A lot of people also don't know what it means to be black because, like I said, everyone is from different tribes. So you can't communicate across the table unless you are fortunate enough to be born in a community that is the same tribe as you. You can't collaborate. You sit there, you try to collaborate. Yeah, all right. All right. Go ahead. Try to collaborate. Go collaborate. Matter of fact, get together outside and collaborate. See how well that goes for you. All these people out here trying to collaborate. Look what's going on. They always end up warring, all types of crazy stuff like that. You don't have no type of men to sit there and actually do any type of real business, and you all are different tribes. They was talking about these people. What are these tribes? These tribes would be flat out. These tribes would be straight up gangs. And then what happens? They were like, oh, they were a part of this gang, and then the OGs died. Now they just running around crazy, and that is the story. You over here, you done sat up here and you done survived the system. Now you over here trying to live it out like your OGs done died, and your OG is right there bailing you out of jail, and then here you are running to the streets every day because you don't know what it means. Now I have so many notes. But for me to say anything more than what I said, it would be for me to really refine and really speak hyper about where I've taken things. And I think what I've said has been enough for this one piece. I will say this. If this video, see, I do not do any like, commenting, and subscribing because I know for a fact like I'm really operating on my own time. But I'll say if this video can get like 10 likes, then I'll be inclined to give a very refined, high detail explanation of all the archetypes. And I think it can be very useful, especially when you know where you lie on the spectrum. If you know that you're lost, if you know that you got that HBCU background or whatever, if you know that you're in the 5% or whatever, by me giving you like a real refined, detailed explanation of where you stand in things, you can kind of like know what your challenges are and how you can rise up in the consciousness, perspective, and intelligence arc and get closer to being at that 5%. One thing you will notice is if your objective is to succeed in life, uh, contrary to the other half, what you will realize is that Black people have more. No matter how you want to, place it, and they deal with substantially less. Like the Smiths, Will Smith, and all, and them, those are some Black people. Colin Powell, that's a Black person. Um, Devin Haney, um, J. Cole's and stuff like that. They don't deal with Boyce Watkins, all of them. They don't, they tend to find a way to create stability because they have things like savings accounts and all this other stuff. So if you would like to get to be able to rise in prosperity and and hope and things like that, then it'll really help, you understand, the other archetypes so that you can better communicate across. Because like I said, you'll one thing that happens, like I said, 25% are on the other upper half, 75% on the lower half. One big issue is when the upper half tries to communicate with the lower half and they dumb themselves down as a way to try to relate. Also, when the lower half, I don't even know what they do. A lot of times they just hate people that are upper and above. And this is another thing about not having a country. This is why there's so much hatred. Because without there being a core archetype, there can't be any agreed upon conditions of love. So you can't give a person love unless they're real. But see, what happened to the term being real? Real got convoluted. Real got convoluted real bad. See, real at one point was, civil rights. Real was Colin Kaepernick, but over time, real became being a real slave. Real became really going through the real became just really going through the system. You go to jail, you know, you find yourself, fighting for your life. 100 days, 100 nights. Oh, you real now? When that's not what made you real. It's interesting. I have Tupac here as like a 5%. The good side of Tupac is the 5%. The other side of Tupac, I still haven't come to terms with it yet. It just seems, I don't know, Tupac just seemed to be the type of dude that was always double dipping. Had, one foot on one side, one foot on the other side. Tupac is another example of a dude that, in an effort to be relatable, he in an effort to be relatable, he, put himself in a horrible situation. He went down in consciousness. He went down in intellect in an effort to try to be accepted. And it's in those ways that it's just in those ways all he could have done so much better that it really held back his overall image to this day. Like it just he even though he's overall perceived as positive, it just always keeps him down. But Tupac's, and for any reason, his Black Panther understanding. So the last thing I wanted to leave on with this part of it, because like I said, if I get 10 likes, as much as I don't like to even put numbers on things, I'll give a more like refined explanation of these things. I wanted to say that even though these percentages are sort of like not the best, it's like, oh man, only 25% of black people are really like, you know, above the positivity line. Yes, only 25% of black people are above the positivity line. However, there is a shift in these things, and it depends on where you go. So if when you go from different states, from what I found, depending on where the state lies in the Great Migration, you're more likely to get more of a higher percentage of the top half than the lower half. When you go more so into the southern states, that's where you're more likely to get the low half than the top half. Now, one thing that I have said in the past is just sort of a little, tick for tack with this is that a lot of this typically would basically accumulate into just like northern and southern bias. So what I said in the past is like there are a lot of people from the south that are very like conscious and also intelligent. And the thing about it is those people in the south would not, the difference between them and a lot of the others is that they would not let themselves be seen as a slave. And they would never refer to themselves as a slave. So you sit there and call them like different slave names, and they'll correct you with that. So that's just the difference. But with like I said, once you what you will notice is as you go up through the Great Migration, which was basically from the South to DC to Philadelphia to New York to Detroit and then to California, you also know you'll realize that the ratio of these types of archetypes will change and you'll get more of the higher percentage than the lower percentage. Interesting enough, the Underground Railroad was the same. The Underground Railroad took you from the south to the north. And those that made it to the other side of the Underground Railroad typically have more high intelligence, high conscious perspectives. Like I said, the real slave, out of all the slaves, the smartest slave and the most conscious slave was the real slave. And what you will realize in the system, out of the black people that are born in the system, the smartest ones are the real ones, not the house ones and not the field ones. It's the real ones. So so what do I mean? So for example, when you go to Detroit, you're going to get probably a ratio of 50% real slaves, whereas the average ratio of I don't even like saying the word slaves at this point. But you know what I'm getting at. All right, so here in Detroit, you're gonna get 50% real. In Baltimore, you're gonna get 50% real. In here where I'm at in Northern Virginia, you are going to get 5%, 5% real. So you can kind of see how that changes. Why is this? Because the way the system is structured and how central the system is to your existence. See, in places like Baltimore and Detroit, just getting a simple job is a lot more difficult. Like I said, when it comes to things like saving accounts and being able to save money, most black people can't do these things. So in places where these things are more prevalent, you get more black people that go to the system more black people that see the reality, what it really means to be black, the difference between being black and being everyone else, and they become real. A statement that I said a long time ago is like all black men are gangsters. All black men are gangsters. When you are real, you understand this. So you're gonna find, where do you find the most black men? You're gonna find them in Detroit. You're gonna find them in Baltimore. You're gonna also, and at 5%, 5% of them you'll find them here in Virginia. A lot of these people here are able to get jobs. So for this reason, a lot of people in Virginia are able to be black people. There's more black people in Virginia. Um, let's see how many black people do, I don't know. In Virginia, you'll get at a rate of 20%. So around the United States, black people only exist at a rate of 10%. But here in Virginia, black people exist at a rate. I even argue they could probably even exist at a rate of 40%. No, they exist at a high rate. And then here in Virginia, lost Negroes are at about 30%, whereas across the country they're at about 15%. In Detroit, you're gonna have more 5%. So, and then also in places like Baltimore, you're gonna have less lost black people. So, and this is because of what? This is because of the system that you're constantly being. You go outside, you're constantly being you're constantly being exposed to the system. Same thing with in Atlanta. In Atlanta, far you're not gonna have any lost black people in Atlanta. Why? Because you come outside, you see what's going on. So so these ratios change, but on average, this is what these ratios are. In any given population, this is typically how the ratios play out. So yeah, when you know where you're at, then you can basically, by knowing these five archetypes or these six archetypes, depending on how you are able to map it, then you're able to get a really good idea of cross relationships and also sort of like you're able to understand cross relationships in order, and also like handicaps. That's a good way to put it. So for example, so so black people and 5%, 5%ers, for the most part, are neutral. The only difference between black people and 5%ers is black people fight for rights. 5%ers fight for freedom. So whenever it comes to situations of like freedom, whenever it comes to situations of like right and wrong, a 5% black person, like a pro black person, is always gonna fight that fight. Whereas like the average black person, if they can't attribute it to some sort of law or some sort of right, then they're not gonna take that fight. Like if they can't sit there and determine like that some law is gonna be passed or some opportunity is gonna be given, then they're not willing to stand up against it. One example of this has been the alteration of Black history in alignment with homosexuality. Black people are not going to have, or do not care about Black history being um, twisted and rewritten as being gay pride. However, pro Black people are never going to let that fly. Um, Another dynamic is real slaves and field slaves. So the thing about it is, even though the real and the field are, whatever, the real is like basically the strongest of the field. So they have the same sort of background and culture, and they're really very much rooted in the same nature. They're typically born of the same background, so they sort of have that together. The only difference is a field black person could never accept um, an elite black person, because they have a master, um, and their relationship with their master will never allow them to accept an elite black person for who they are. They can't accept them for who they are. One, because an elite black person in their existence highlights the inequity between the slave and the master, but then also they ultimately resent um, the intelligence of the elite black person, the person that's more than 5%. They also resent black people in general, like black people that have jobs, black people that have savings accounts. Field black people and house black people are not a fan of that. These are the people that will typically just really just like hate your guts for succeeding, and this is something that will really blow your mind. So yeah, those are the five archetypes. One last time, you have 5%. You have black people. You have real black people. That's the way I can put it. Then you have field black people, and you have house black people. But earlier in this example, I used the term slaves because what you will realize is that when you divide the groups into two subgroups, you will find that the core difference in their ideologies and the core difference in their behavior, nature, spirit, goals, objectives is how they identify with them being black as as in relationship to them being slaves. See, one thing about Muhammad Ali is one. I mean, he was really good friends with Malcolm X, but this man changed his last name to X because of how much he didn't want to be associated with slavery. And so it's this miseducation is for a lot of the reasons why this type of stuff is considered to be like in the school systems as like racist and stuff like that, because ultimately it all accumulates into the damage of like slavery, and it really like highlights like black contribution and stuff like that. And there's just so many people in this world in general are below the intelligence arc of consciousness. So it's just kind of like one of these things where fools hate wisdom, but it's also one of these things where because black people have gone through slavery, they don't have the foundation. Because black people have gone through slavery, they don't have the foundation to really for for black people that aren't intelligent to really like thrive, because there's no basis, platform, resource where the history can really be explained like relative to like black reality, because black reality is always glazed over and it's always pacified and it's always lightened up under the reality is a lot harsher than most people can really accept. It's a lot more unreal than most people are able to come to terms with. Like I can sit here and tell you that 75% of black people are below the poverty line, or below the lower levels of consciousness, and like you could debate it until you take into consideration things like happiness, health, and then also some form of government assistance like welfare, SNAP, and Medicaid. Once you understand, like, okay, if this person is on welfare, SNAP, or Medicaid, then that means that they are basically under the 35K margin, which means that they're at the whim of the system. That means that they are in the system. These type of people, this is the reason why they vote the way that they vote. This is the reason why they move the way that they move. It's and the more you're able to understand like these relationship dynamics between a 5%er, a lost black person, a lost black person, a field black person, a field black person, a real black person, a black modern, and a traditional black person as it's tied to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, then when there's a blindfold on and you're sitting there in the room trying to figure out who the black person is and who the black person isn't, you'll be able to figure out who the who's not black in the room with the blindfold on. You'll be able to figure it out. You'll understand why a statement like all black men are gangsters is real. And then like one thing about like my guy Mike that he touched based on um with Hispanic people, and this is a really good example of like the impact of slavery, is one thing I like to kind of like reference when it comes to like cultures and developing and growing and why a country is important is because see the Italians, they managed to come up from up under the poverty that black people exist in. And I think this is the poverty that Mike was referring to when he was talking about Mexican people turning their backs on black people. I think what he's really referring to are the Mexican people that don't live in poverty and don't support black people. But it's no different from the Italian people that don't live in poverty and don't support black people. And it's no different from the Asian people that don't live in poverty and don't support black people. See, there was once a time when they were right by our side and they lived in the exact same communities as us and they did, you know, the exact same things and they sort of existed under oppression and the loss losing in this game of capitalism the same way that we did, but they managed to overcome those things and they managed to overcome those things by staying true to their highest values. Their highest values were determined in their countries. Their highest values are what they hold within their culture, and their highest values are what hold their family together. They look at their elite and they look up to their elite, and it's their elite that guide them into being all that they can be. Black people, on the other hand, we we are looking towards slavery, and so as a byproduct of that, it is slavery that ultimately defines the the ultimate whim of the culture, and it is through slavery that you can see that these archetypes. See, these archetypes still exist in other cultures. Like I said, these are archetypes based on intelligence. Intelligence alongside consciousness is basically what determines these archetypes. But these archetypes could be processed in other cultures. Their percentages will vary. Like for example, the lowest of the archetypes, which would be like their field workers, for example, they might not have as many field workers right now. Hispanic people have a lot of field workers, but guess what? Their field workers are loyal to their country. So they have love for one another, no matter how you dice it up. They're not sitting out there. One thing you don't hear these Mexican people talk about is Mexican people turning their backs on them. And just a quick correction because I don't like I said I never want to call all Hispanic people Mexican people, but ain't nobody tripping about what's going on because they know that all they got to do is just do the right paperwork and they can get through. Nothing bad has happened to these people. They know that these people are not legal. So, you know, that's the dilemma that they're having, but they're not having like a cultural dilemma. They're not having they're not, their culture is not being destroyed and basically starved out due to their inability to create independence, due to their dependence on having a, a head of household position someone else occupy it for them. This is the division of the two groups. This is the division of the two mindsets. There's some pieces I really want to put out, and I've always been questioning, like, okay, when is the time going to be? You know, one thing that's prevented me from putting this piece out, I was like, man, how harsh could this really be? Like, I'm already out here just on my little, you know, about all this other black stuff, and it already puts me in this little box or whatever. Like, when am I going to say this? But then again, there also is some other information, like I want to speak about, like talking, talking white or talking black, or you know what that means. You know, other things that I've spoken on are like toms and stuff like that. I put out some real information about toms. These are all aspects of black consciousness, and the more you understand these things, the more it's easier to make sense of your environment and your reality. Because see, you could be black modern and you could go along with the program. The consequence of it is you'll be blind to the reasoning behind the program. These people were out here literally 6 months ago talking about Black Trans Matter, and they're just blind to the reality that the name of the group was Black Lives Matter. Like, and they don't even see the grand picture is that it's a total anti-black campaign. Like, what part of Get Out did they not understand? But you know, this is what comes with this. So with that said, the way I like closing these out is like referencing like something else, you know, that I'm working on, that like I'm kind of at whatever I'm proud of or whatever. And if you like to know that, like my references or whatever, like some like supportive information I have to that I use to help get to this point of consciousness, that I also use to sort of like back my perspective, then my Black Consciousness playlist, which is completed now, it's at about 200 videos. It will give you a background of everything associated with my Black perspective. It also give you a Black background of what being Black is. Absolutely. And you can check that out. A link to that will be in the description. But ultimately, the moral of this story, and I know I was going to leave one last point, is that when it comes to being Black, another thing you got to understand is that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were the leaders of the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was so true and powerful that it to this day is being used to mule other freedom movements, and it works because it is true. And for that reason, truth is really is where the Black man stands. And it is for this reason that it is it is true that you are not, that your blackness does not, that your blackness is not rooted in slavery, but instead it is rooted in Christ, and it is and instead it is rooted in in the Bible. And the second you start moving and understanding things from this perspective is the second that you start moving up that list of consciousness. You start moving up that list of intelligence, and you start resembling that of what you can ultimately be, and not that of which they tell you that they want you to be. It's at this point where you will be able to tap into the same power source of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, the same power source of Biggie, the same power source of Billie Holiday, the same power source of Floyd Mayweather, the same power source of Michael Jordan, the same power source of every single Black person that has ever lived, that had ever motivated anyone to ever be proud to say it now and say it loud, that they are Black and they are proud. That is Black. And anything else conflicting with that is not. And these are the 5 Black archetypes, so it doesn't have to be such a mystery for you. And so you don't get lost following around the culture, thinking that it's of the culture, like it's not really clearly designed for your self destruction, especially now in this day and age. But with that said, that's my time on this one. And that's my time. Links in the description.